And if we have to call for, even go further to call for a commission of inquiry, we'll do that. But we're not going to let up. The story that broke, apparently, 3 years ago, from what I understand, there was a letter to the editor. There were complaints already in the school. They ignored the parents. And a letter appeared to the editor of the National Post. And a blogger, Blazing Cat Fur, picked up on it and did some research on it. There were minutes of the meetings. Totally being silenced. We won't stand idly by for silence. Everything must be exposed. We need to know what's going on. And hatred and intolerance and supremacy is not going to be tolerated in our school system that we pay for. Thank you.
The Costa Christian Mission. And I'd just like to state up front that this coalition is not a coalition against religious freedoms. It has no intent on barring or trying to stop the practice of religious freedoms. That's protected under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms of Canada. We are completely for religious freedom. What we are against is the practice of religious practices and religious beliefs in a public school system that is funded by the people of Toronto. Now this case, we shouldn't even be having this discussion here today. This was resolved in 1988 with the Ontario Court of Appeal, which ruled that there was not to be any religious practices, observances taking place during school hours at a public school. Now, my colleague had mentioned here that there is systemic discrimination that is shown to other people of other faiths, particularly Christians. I know for a fact, as a minister, I have visited a number of high schools in the Toronto area and in the GTA, where Christian students have informed me that during Christmas, when they wanted to share something of the Christian story about the birth of Christ, they were barred by the principal from doing so during school hours because this was seen as a violation of the Education Act. But the same students informed me that during Ramadan, during the season of Ramadan, Muslims were allowed to talk about their faith, they were allowed to distribute Qurans, etc. Now, the fact that this is happening in a Toronto school is of great concern for us. It's not a Catholic school here, we're talking about a public school. These prayers are not taking place before school hours, during lunchtime or after school hours, the way Christians and Jews and everyone else would be the time that they would meet. They're meeting during school hours, and this is of great concern for us. We're also concerned about the fact that during these prayers, there is definitely a segregation that takes place between the men, the women, and as has been mentioned earlier, menstruating women. Now, this may be part of the Islamic faith, and I believe that it is, but this does not have a place in our public school system. This has a place in the mosque, this may have a place in certain forms of Orthodox Judaism, but definitely not in a public school system. And so what we see here is actually not so much an accommodation, what we see here is actually a covert violation of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which sees all Canadians as equals, and that includes men and women. And so our attempt here today is to communicate this great concern. If this gets passed in the school, in Valley High School, where is it going to stop? Where is it going to end? And another thing that has not been mentioned here today is also what is disconcerting is that during, many people are not aware of the fact that during Muslim prayers, the first surah is recited, Surah Al-Fatiha. And in that surah, there is a systemic cursing of the Jews and the Christians, where it talks about do not guide those upon whom your anger rests. This has been understood in Islamic history by famous commentators like Ibn Kathir as a reference to the Jews, and those who are misled, or those who have been led astray, this is a reference to a covert reference to the Christians. So this is very disconcerting to me as a Christian, and I'm sure as with my Jewish friend, that these prayers are taking place in a Toronto school which vilifies Jews and Christians daily, every time these prayers take place. So once again, we are not here to criticize the free act of religious expression, the freedom of expression of that religion. What we are here to say is that we see the Toronto District School Board as acting in favoritism. They are giving preferential treatment to a specific religion which they will not accommodate to other religious groups. The removal of the Lord's Prayer from our schools. We have no more Christmas pageants or a thing of the past. We don't have Christmas trees. We now have holiday trees. So if we are going to be consistent, if you're going to grant freedom to one particular religion, then you must grant freedom to all religion. If you're not going to grant freedom to all religion, then you must be consistent. So what we are calling here for this afternoon is consistency. Let us be consistent. Let us honor the Education Act. Let us honor the Charter of Rights and Freedom. Muslims want to pray. They can go to their mosques. They can take time out during lunchtime, whatever it may be, after school hours. But this should not be done in a publicly and taxpayer-funded school system. And as a taxpayer, I object to this.
You know, gender apartheid is not what my forefathers really had in mind. You know, my family's been here for more than 350 years. My forefather was a carpenter that came to Quebec City from France and with the Jesuit priests and built some buildings that we all like in Quebec City. My family's been there 350 years, 200 years before Confederation. That's to say that we know what the thinking was in the establishment of this country of Canada of ours. We have a very rich country. And there's reasons for that, because of our Judeo-Christian heritage. You know, Canada was founded upon principles which recognize the supremacy of God. That is not Allah, that is God. And the rule of law. We're the ones, Judeo-Christian heritage, we're the ones that shed blood for liberty and democracy. My grandfather was in the First World War. My father was in the Second World War. We fight for democracy and liberty everywhere. We will certainly fight for gender equality in Canada, our country. There's no doubt about that, none whatsoever. And if anybody thinks that differently, we have a solution for them, which I will tell you in a minute. You know, we're in favor of reasonable accommodation for many multicultural faiths. I mean, it's because of our tradition and our heritage that we allow for separation of state and religion. Freedom of expression, freedom of religion, equality of all. We have made reasonable accommodation for all cultures. I'm married to a Latina. I speak Spanish and French and English. I don't have a problem with other cultures. I love them. But reasonable accommodation means reasonableness. We don't want to make people feel uncomfortable, but we don't want you to forget who we are. Now, do you think that there's a religion that's going to impose its Islamic prayers in our schools? How deluded you must be. That isn't going to happen. I said we're the 6th largest political party, but we're the only one, the only political party that advocates for a moratorium on any further immigration from Sharia law nations. We're the only political party that advocates for that. Enough's enough. We see what's happening in England, in the Netherlands, in Germany, in France. We see that. We learn from others. We're not going to learn it firsthand here in Canada or our country. No, absolutely not. And so, we're advocating for a moratorium on any further immigration from Sharia law nations. We know that they're devout people, Islamists. I understand that. I respect their religion. But not in my country. Not here. Not here. If you want to impose gender apartheid, that's not part of the deal. If you want to practice eat halal meat, go ahead, go home, eat halal meat. Have a restaurant if you want, right? But you're not going to have it in Scarborough General Hospital. Why would you impose your values on the rest of us when we're accommodating? This doesn't make sense. Is there another religion, is there another culture that expects so much? I don't think so. Enough's enough. We draw the line